Okay, welcome to yet another Oceanside chat from VSG, the Viterbi Startup Garage, a unique incubator that USC Viterbi pays for out of pocket. We do not take equity, and your IP is safe with us, and you get to reside here in Marina Del Rey with us while we provide you resources. This is one of those resources, our Oceanside chat. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Jonah. He has been with us for quite some time now. His first Oceanside chat, way back when we started recording them, was Product Wow Moments. I'm going to toss the Airtable for all of our past chats. Watch it. The teams at the garage, when they participated in Product Wow Moments, were blown away at how useful that 40-minute presentation was. And honestly, it's still one of the best ones that we've ever done. He's also participated in our VC Angel Office Hours, which is basically when we give all the founders in the garage a punch to the gut to let them know all of the mistakes they're making during their pitches. And he's done one iteration of pitch decks that raise. And this is his second time doing that with us. And for the record, him providing this particular resource has gotten him coverage at Collision 2022. He knows what he's talking about. He has experience and is an expert in venture capital, go-to-market, storytelling, team building, and hiring. He's been working with an accelerator on the fund side and on the team acquisition. He just does it all. Plus, he's a founder himself and probably will continue to be so for the rest of his life founding companies. I'll let Jonah take it from here. I really can't wait for this presentation. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. Go for it, Jonah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And everyone, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciated. As she mentioned, at any point, do hop right in with questions because this is for you. So here's how I'm going to start off. I'm going to start off with a sentence that I think we all already know, but raising money is really hard. It's always been hard. It's gotten harder in the last little bit. We're seeing some signs of life on the fundraising front, but raising money is hard. And a great pitch makes it just a heck of a lot easier. So what I'm going to talk about today is, simply put, how do we make a great pitch? Tactical, step-by-step instructions that you can follow to have the kind of pitch deck that raises venture capital. And as was mentioned, our accelerator forum, we are funding about 100 companies a year. I'm leading about 150 outbound fundraisers a year. So we see a lot of this and a lot of data and a lot of stories have gone into this. But please don't be shy to ask questions. So first of all, here's kind of an inconvenient truth about fundraising. It's that at the early stages, and I'll define the early stages as angel stage, pre-seed stage, even seed stage, you and your company are not worth its underlying intrinsic value. You've been at it for a little bit, maybe you've got a pilot, maybe you've got some customers, maybe you don't, maybe you've just got a product, maybe you've just got a story. All of those things are fine. The largest companies in history all started with those same small starting points. That's how this works. That's okay. But you're worth what the market perceives your value to be. And that's why you hear these wild stories of some companies raising at these outlandish valuations and or being successful with not very much, and other people struggling. It's because it's not like buying, say, an apartment building or a bunch of machinery. There isn't a lot of intrinsic value in most early stage hardware, software, or consumer businesses. They're worth what someone will pay for them. That means that the goal of early stage fundraising and today's session is to start the process of building perceived value of your business. And because it's arbitrary, it's something that a pitch can have a huge amount of impact on. This isn't, even the way selling a house, the pictures of the house can change the value of it a bit. Ultimately, people are still going to walk through the house. Here, there kind of isn't a house. So the pictures in the pitch are probably one of the single biggest drivers of how successful you're going to be, which is really hard to wrap your head around. Okay, so if perceived value is actually the thing we're trying to build, how do we build perceived value in a business? So first and foremost, what other VCs think of your company, also known as heat, is going to drive a lot of perceived value into your business. And a lot of what we're going to talk today is how we get VCs to think positively about our business. But that's going to drive something that's market heat. There's the perception of your market. Some markets are weak, some are hot. There's nothing you can really do about that, but we can frame it in certain ways. There's some markets that VCs just really don't like funding that much right now. Whereas there's others, like we're seeing with, large language models, where there's huge sums of money going into that. So we want to make sure that we're understanding which market we're framing ourselves as being and understanding what the market is valuing right now so that we can catch those waves. The perception of your team, your traction, all of that good stuff. And again, notice I didn't say your team or your traction, because really it's going to be the perception of those things. Again, a lot of these things are kind of arbitrary. Whether or not you have founder market fit is definitionally a subjective decision. You already got into a great school, right? So we've got, we've got a lot of the kind of natural components. So we need to build up the perception that you're the right people to get this business funded. Another thing that makes up perceived value is the big idea factor. Venture capitalists are looking for a business that's going to sell for more than $1 billion, which means it needs to be a big idea. And we're going to talk about this a lot, but if you look at the data from things like DocSend, the vision slide is the third most viewed slide of any presentation. So what is that big idea? Did you convey that big idea? Did you show how the world's going to be different? Did you show that you're driving towards a very large outcome? That's going to matter a lot. And then how well you package yourself, the presentation layer. This shouldn't matter. It shouldn't make a difference. It makes absolutely no sense that we're judging whether or not a business is going to be successful or future based on presentation layer, but we do. And that's everything from how good is the design of your deck, to how well do you show up that day, to even like the lighting of your setup. What is in your background? Like, if you'll notice, a lot of us are pretty intentional about what our backgrounds are. They're kind of, there for whatever reason. So, and lighting, like it all matters. It all contributes to an overall perception of you. Okay, so we know we're trying to build perceived value of our business in order to get funded. So here's the thing. Your pitch deck is the chance to cover off most of these elements, if not all of them, and build the kind of market heat that results in very successful raises. The reality of the matter is, for 90 to 95% of the VCs you interact with, your pitch deck will be their sole point of interacting with you. This is what they're going to see. This is your profile. This is the everything. And again, that may not make a lot of sense, but that is how our system currently works. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you tactically how to build a pitch deck that hits every single one of those boxes and is built just for you. Okay, so here's the first rule. The pitch deck is not a collection of slides. You'll see all the time, it's like, well, it needs to have a market slide and it needs to have, yes, it needs to have all those things. We'll get into the elements that it must have. But what a pitch deck really is a story. It's a clear, concise story that tells any potential investor without any additional information why you and your team are building a company that's going to get to $100 million in revenue within 7 years. That's what a pitch deck is. It's not anything else. It's a story about how you're getting to $100 million in revenue. The quicker, the better. Without that clear story and path, you are unlikely to raise venture capital. That sentence is almost always true, almost without exception. The exception being you are like a double PhD with 1 million patents, and the underlying technology is so valuable that you can figure a use case around it. But this has to be the case. And you have to think about it in a story. And I just want to be really clear when I say story, I mean the kind of story you could tell someone who isn't in your field, that you could tell like your aunt or your uncle in 3 minutes or less. And it's just like, hey, I'm doing this, and a story. So I'm going to get into how we do that. But the biggest mistake people make in building pitch decks for fundraising is they start with a collection of slides and try and build a story, if they try and build a story. Instead, what I'm urging you to do is find your story and then build a pitch deck around that. Okay, so we've agreed that we have to build perceived value in our business, and that to do that, we have to tell a story about how our business is getting to $100 million in revenue with our team. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but here's some rules that should always be followed. So before I get into how to do it, here's some just quick rules. Build a case. If you say it, prove it. VCs hear a ton of wild claims. So if you're going to tell me that the market is $20 billion, show that it's from a McKinsey study or whomever, or show me that you did the math, that there's, 1,000 potential customers that could each pay $200,000, thereby making the market. If you're going to say something, because we know that as founders, you've got deep conviction around your businesses. Your job is to make us have deep conviction around your businesses. But every founder we meet has deep conviction. That's not a differentiator. So every founder says things that they believe to be true. We need external validation. So if you're going to say something, prove it. Vision matters. It is far easier to fundraise with a big idea. The most ridiculous story about this, for those of you that followed the FTX, was anyone following the FTX thing? So there's the legendary deposition where they leaked the Sequoia call between SBF and Sequoia. And if you read that call, they ask him, they're like, what's your vision for this? And he says, I want this to be not just a cryptocurrency exchange, but the kind of place where someone could buy a banana, which sounds dumb, and in hindsight was both dumb and malicious and fraudulent. But if you saw the court documents, the Sequoia partners, who are brilliant, accomplished people, were slacking each other, being like, this is amazing, I love this founder. Because the story SBF was telling was a vision about a new future of money, and cryptocurrency being the default standard for how money is spent. There is no bigger market. He had a big idea and a clear story on how to tell it. And as insane as that sounds, that comment of, I want to be able to buy a banana on FTX, literally got some of the best investors on planet Earth to be like, I love this guy. Vision matters a lot. You obviously are unlikely to have that complete big idea right now completed. You're starting with a wedge or an MVP or whatever methodology you're starting with. But we need to know how the world's going to be different now that once you're successful. The other one is strengths first. Here's a little dirty secret about VCs. We don't read. The average amount of time spent on a deck, if you combine the different data sources like DocSend and Visible and all the people that do this for a living, for a pre-seed and seed round, including successful fundraisers, is less than 90 seconds. And so if you're wondering how we can take that all in 90 seconds, we can't. It's all we're trying to take in is the story. That also includes decks that get abandoned halfway, which is definitely a very real thing. So all of you have strengths and superpowers. You have personal strengths and superpowers, and your business has strengths and superpowers. Start with those. You're trying to tell a story about why you're awesome. If you have amazing customers, that shouldn't be on slide 10 because you read somewhere that traction goes on slide 10. It should be like, hey, I have amazing customers and here's why. If you sold your last business, if you, whatever is great about you or your business, and there is, not to be cheesy, something great in all of us and great in all of your businesses, where people as smart as you wouldn't have done this, start with that. And of course, the last one is always be iterating. Whatever you do the first time likely needs improvement. That is not just a pitch deck thing. That might be just like a life thing. Okay, so those are our rules. We're going to build a case. We're going to make sure we've got a big vision. We're going to lead with strengths. Okay, so to summarize, we are trying to build perceived heat in our business because our company is worth what someone's going to pay for it, which is basically totally made up. We are going to tell a story of how we're building a big business to like $100 million in revenue, a story. And in telling that story, we're going to build a case, we're going to have a big vision, and we're going to lead with strength. Awesome. Okay, that all makes sense. Except like the big question is like, sounds cool. What do I do now? Well, unlike some other people, I've been a founder for 20 years. So I'm actually going to give you a step-by-step guide to tactically implement this because you're busy. And I find a lot of startup advice that kind of stays at this level to be mostly useless, respectfully. Okay, so here's how we do it. We're going to pick a narrative framework. All stories have frameworks. Like Pixar has a legendary framework for the way they make stories. Greek tragedies, you know, there's a framework for how these can go. And I'm going to give you a bunch of frameworks, and you're going to pick the one that makes the most sense for you. You're going to build the case. So you're going to fill in the supporting materials around your story, because a story in this world without facts is just a fairy tale, and that's not what we're interested in doing here. We're interested in raising capital. We're going to check the boxes. There's a bunch of boxes that need to be checked on every pitch, but for some reason, VCs don't tell any of us. I don't know why we do that. It seems like we got a lot of time to tweet. We should be able to communicate effectively, but we don't. So awesome. And we're going to iterate relentlessly. Okay, so starting with narrative frameworks. There's many narrative frameworks, but pick an arc that best frames the why and why now you are the right team to bet on. There are many choices, but they ultimately must tell the story of your future. And here's a couple examples. So here's one. So a eureka moment. So use this if you've got a core insight that is non-obvious and transformational. So that could be like, hey, you know, my name's Kathy. I'm such and such. I was working for my internship, or I was working at Deloitte, or I was coding one night, and I sat around and I realized that, you know, the way we're using this is all wrong. And that if we just did X thing, we'd have a much better way to put code into production, as an example. And the impact of doing it this different way means we could save, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of engineering hours a year. And my vision is to be the de facto standard for the way that engineers everywhere deploy and debug their code. Here's my solution. Here's how we're actually going to put that into action. This is the product. And that product has like a $40 billion market, according to McKinsey. And in my early conversations, IBM and Flexport and, you know, Joe's Pizzeria are all looking to use it. So if you can see what I did there, I actually told a story. I used no technical terms. I told it in about 90 seconds. And then for your pitch deck, you'll fill in actual information, like what the solution actually is, what the market size actually is. But that's one story for if you've got like a non-obvious insight about how you can do it. And that's leading with a strength, because in that case, you've got a unique approach that would be your strength. You're leading with team. Maybe your strength is you because you're an expert in the field. Here's another one. If you've got great traction, you can literally just start off and be like, these are my customers. They say this amazing thing about us. And the problem we solved for them was that they were really having trouble tracking, pests in the production process of their food product. And we realized that if we could become the way that, food spoilage in production across the world globally was eliminated, we could build a huge company. And here's how we're doing it. We're using computer vision to blah, blah, blah. And the reason why it works over existing solutions is this. And those 20 customers I showed you, those are just the tip of the iceberg. Food production is a $50 billion market. Why are we the ones building this? Because I'm Stacy and I used to work in the food safety oversight committee at McDonald's or whatever, right? Again, a story that leads with the strengths of me and my business. Society is changing. We saw this one all the time, like COVID and remote, right? Like there are tons of tools that came out. AI is another one, right? There's been the societal shift where AI is now at the cornerstone to many of our software products, right? And so we could say, we all know that there's this huge paradigm shift to AI, and the impact of that change means tons of the software products we use and love are going to shift dramatically to a new paradigm. And that shift creates this huge opportunity for, a browser that is AI first. We're building that browser. The browsing market is $100 billion. And our core insight of why current browsers aren't just going to be able to incorporate is this. Here's the actual product that we built. Here are the people that love it. And here is us. So again, a story. And I could easily tell that to anyone, because you know what happens when you guys get off the phone with a VC? The person next to me or on Slack is like, oh, what do they do again? And I have to relay in like 30 seconds what the story is. I'm like, oh, they're solving the food production pest thing with computer vision. And Stacy's amazing. That's how conversations actually go inside venture funds at the early stage. So I've got a few others, but it's your job to come up with before you write a word on a computer. Well, sorry, actually, if you want to build the narrative on a computer, go nuts. But how you do it is fine. I use paper. I'm old. It's fine. So before you write a deck of any kind, you need to be able to do your version of what I just did for your business. And that's the story you're going to tell everyone in the world when they're like, what are you working on? You'll tell them, and they'll be like, how'd that happen? This is it. There's what I call the Tony Stark. If you built something technically difficult and unique, it's like, oh, I built this thing that could power my, that stops me from dying, and now I can fly. And actually, it turns out that people really want personal flight suits, and it's a great system for national defense. I mean, questionable, but it's a movie. We'll give it to them. And my vision is that everyone is going to be an Iron Man, and we're the team to do it because I used to work at, Boston Dynamics, and I used to work in Boeing, and here's what we built, personal Iron Man suits, and our go-to-market is we're going to distribute down through, I don't know, Apple, whatever, and we've already built our prototype. That's if you've done something technically really difficult. You start with the big solve. Or if you're building in a massive market, right? These are what all these LLM providers are doing right now. They're like, we all know McKinsey says 300 million jobs are going to be impacted by AI by 2030 or whatever, 2050. They made up numbers. I forget what made up numbers they made. our unique angle is we've got a proprietary data set that no one else has access to because we're the only people that can train on blah, 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 blah. Or we invented the transformer, or we're taking this really vertical approach, whatever your unique angle is. And our vision with this unique approach is to be, I think everyone gets what I'm saying here. I'm going to pause here for two things. One, any questions to this point on narrative or anything I've said to this point? And then I'll ask the second question.
So feel free to use the hand raise function. I will start by asking, okay, so storytelling and these narrative frameworks, I think, are really easy for certain types of people who have, real business sense, because they're thinking about their product as it affects the world in a business way, right? I am often working with engineers who are solving an engineer's problem in an engineering world, and they don't have the wherewithal to even start to answer a lot of the questions that I think the narrative framework requires, right? And so then I'm put in a position where I'm like, how do I help you to get to that point? A lot of it is just conversation, but do you think that there's value to outsourcing some of that know-how? Meaning like employing somebody who has better business sense and just sitting with them and talking about the engineering problem and letting them answer some of these questions? Or do you think it's important for the founders to do this themselves and to grow in this way?
So first off, ENJO3, not unfamiliar with the problem. But so, and which is weird when you hear me talk now, but so I used to have this problem, but two things. One, I think it's really important that every founder goes on the journey. As a founder, you have to know how to do this. Now, as a founder, there's a million skill sets that we're all going to need that we don't have. I'm bad at like a huge swath of things, and I've been a founder a lot of times. So I think it's a great question. What you can outsource is the help around the table to help you arrive at your answers. So you can outsource someone to help you write the deck. You can have advisors and mentors asking you these questions. But if you don't have those answers yourselves as the founder, it's going to be really difficult to raise venture capital. So that's what's really good about, for example, a lot of the mentors you have. This is one where you can go to the mentor and be like, look, so let's say you've got a big technical solve. It's like, look, like I solved this thing and like, I think it's got some applications here, and then talk through it with people. This is unlikely for anyone, business sense or not, to be easy to do. I know I'm framing it like it's easy to do. This is the result of 23 years of failing at this. So it's not easy, but it's what's necessary. So I don't think you can outsource doing this. I think these are the questions you need to know. But I do think this is another one of those it takes a village type scenarios. And to the engineers out there, don't feel like you're deficient because this is not easy for you. This isn't easy for the Harvard MBAs that come through our shop. I've just been working on this one specific thing called narrative for 4 years, so I can do it off the top of my head. I've also given this talk more than 100 times. So I don't want anyone to feel lesser here. It's hard. It's very, very hard, but it's necessary.
Follow up, in the world of technical solutions, usually, or not usually, but in some cases, the go-to-market is some proof of concept for like an element, or, it's kind of like the business vision is something very big, but the product in and of itself is very narrow.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, how within this framework would you position that conversation? Like, do you start with this kind of like, this is what we're working on now, and this is where we intend to be? Or is
Yeah.
that a mistake because you lose the people along that way and maybe you need to start big and then suggest, and our first step is this?
So that's an awesome question. So the vision is always, here's how I think about vision. The day you ring the bell because you IPO'd your company and you go on the business network and you get introduced, like, hi, this is Stacy. She just IPO'd her company, technicalai.ai or whatever. They do those 3 sentences that they would introduce you with on TV. That should be your vision slide of how they'd introduce you in 7 years when you IPO. Your solution slide is what your product does now. Plus, everyone understands definitionally, seed and pre-seed fund investing is definitionally aspirational. And by that, I mean, you don't really have anything yet. Like, I don't mean to negate your year of hard work, but like, you've got a small product because it's probably just you or you and a couple people. And so it's all aspirational. We understand that. We want to be able to picture what this looks like as a really big business. So certainly don't lie about what your product is. So your product could be like a Git repo with a bunch of stars. That's awesome. That means people are using it, right? Like, that's amazing. That's great. If you look at, PagerDuty as an example, like, it's now the everything that monitors that side of the house, but it started off with basically just, please tell me when my application falls down. That's all it did in the beginning. It was like, you're down, and you get like a note being like, you're down. And now it, like, it's been around for 15 years, does everything on that side of the house. It's platform play. But they were like, we are going to be the platform play for DevOps. But yeah, the solution was application goes down, notification, and then we're going to build all this stuff.
Got it. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the group before we press on? It's a great time to also just make yourself known. Oh, I guess I definitely stole someone's question. And then Menachem, welcome. You don't have a question though. Okay, I think you're good to move forward.
Amazing. Okay, so we're going to pick our narrative framework. That's step 1. And yes, it's going to be hard, but these are all the answers a VC is going to need for you to be funded. And these are also good questions to ask yourself, because venture capital isn't necessarily for everybody also. And if you don't want to build a gigantic business, that's actually okay. Most of the most impactful and wealthiest people I know do not have venture-backed businesses. Just for raising venture capital, this is kind of the gig, for lack of a better term. Okay, so we're going to pick a narrative framework. And then we're going to build the case. So we're going to lay out that framework that you laid out, and we're going to prove every statement we make. We're going to lay it out as statement, proof point, and impact. There's less room for disagreement. This is kind of always true. So if we make a statement, we're just going to prove it, and we can prove it with math. We can prove it with a quote from someone. We can prove it with something else, but just show it. So we can do that with even anecdotal evidence, right? Like, if you're like, a user said, that's someone who's not you validating what you're saying. Because again, all founders have massive conviction, and a VC's job is to wade through the conviction that the founder has and see which ones the market is going to have conviction. So for market size, this is a good one. Like, if you can find someone with a market size, amazing. If you can't, you need to actually just do the math and be like, how many potential customers are out there and what would they pay? But you can't just make one up. I see that a lot. Okay, so we picked a narrative framework. We are going to build our case and prove the things within that narrative framework. So it's now not a fairy tale. It's a narrative for a business. And now we're going to check the boxes. And this is true for seed, pre-seed, and angel. These are the boxes VCs need to believe in before they will invest. This is true of every fund I have ever met. these four things. They might not lay it out explicitly, but this is happening in the background for everybody. Market. There must clearly and believably be a $1 billion at a minimum, and the big funds like Sequoia need $10 billion plus markets. So if you're a software business, think about 100 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue. If you're a hardware business, even more than that. But this is, if you want to get in front of the big funds, 10 billion is the number that it needs to be. Or like 5 billion and growing fast kind of thing. But there needs to be a believable path to get to a $10 billion market. Because if you look at how these things get to be very big companies, they have hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. And it's, you know, it's not believable you're going to capture an entire market. So you're dealing with subsets. So that's market on market size. No one tells you that. Now so the question I get here a lot is like, well, my initial market is only X. Yes, but what are your expansion markets, right? If you're starting by selling a product, like I've got a founder, you know, starting by selling a product to colleges from USC, and then, okay, but couldn't you also sell this to elementary schools? Couldn't you also sell this to any business? Like, yeah, the product would have to mature, but you could. So you're going to have to showcase that. Team, they have to think you're great. That can be a combination of experience, skills, how you interact, but it matters a huge amount how you present yourself. That's everything from updating your LinkedIn. This happens a lot. People are like, I'm full-time on the business, and like, you know, something else is on your LinkedIn, like that adds questions, you know. So just, if you're out there doing this, you really have to put your best foot forward. There's this other thing in VC where VCs equate you responding to them quickly with you being good or on it, which frankly, I think is absolutely insanely ridiculous. That doesn't change the fact that other VCs believe it. So like letting a VC, and there's also egos involved. A lot of VCs have been very successful, especially now that the power is, you know, tipped back more in VCs' hands than founders. They want quick responses, which is dumb, but you got to kind of play the game a bit. So really think through how you can best put yourself forward in all interactions, right? The other one is, you can't just be, I know it's hard, it's especially hard for me when I was younger. You can't just be happy to be there. This is supposed to be a partnership. So it's polite to thank people for their time. I know you guys are really busy. I genuinely thank you for your time. But this is this right now is a meeting of equals. And those meetings are meetings of equals. You are providing them with a business opportunity. They're potentially providing you with capital. So don't be happy to be there. Be there politely and respectfully as an equal. That was a tough one for me when I was younger. Founder market fit. Being great isn't enough. You need to be great for the problem you're solving and company you're building. So like, why you is one question, but why this for you? Do you know anything about the market? Do you, and this is your team, right? If you're just a brilliant engineer, not important at all. If you're a brilliant engineer who built something technical, but doesn't really understand the applications and the use case of it as well as someone else, then your co-founder needs to be there too. Or, you know, it just needs to make sense. And you need to clearly make that case of why you guys for this, or why you humans rather. Thesis. They have to believe your thesis and vision that there will be a $1 billion business that looks like the vision you presented. So before I invest, I have to believe there's a world where like AI-powered dogs are in every household if you have an AI-powered dog business. Or else it doesn't matter how well you pitch, because I just don't believe in the category. And so you need to make and this is something to do with VC advisors. You're not going to be able to do it easily, is like check the thesis that you're presenting and make sure that it makes sense. Any questions on this one?
This
Incident.
Can I
Sorry, go
just
ahead.
say, this is a tough one for a lot of the founders, I find also, just doing market research, knowing where to go and how to determine some of these. Like, I think the team and the founder market fit is all within you. You can do that. But I do feel like that market slide.
Get help with mentors. It's almost impossible if you're in a new market and this is your first time to accurately do this.
Yeah, and
So,
I feel very bad. A lot of the founders are on the back foot because they're being asked these really difficult questions. And it's not for lack of trying, I feel it's just like for lack of direction and resources. I mean, what would you suggest if you're up against, like you were mentioning, you do that research and McKinsey study, whatever, but like if you don't have that, what else, where else? I just asked ChatGPT. It's like always up on my computer now. And I asked it this question and it gave me a very great, like, I don't know, 15 bullet point list of things to do, but maybe you can just tell me what.
so yeah, actually here I can, I have, if you just give me 1 second, I have a deck on how to do this.
Ooh. I'm glad I asked.
Yes, 1 second. 1 sec. No, that one's getting in from our customers, also relevant.
While you're looking it up, I'll also just add that, even in this, in sales and customer acquisition, this is such a huge thing because a lot of the decision makers aren't necessarily your target customer or your user, and they just want to know what your case for this product is, right? They want to know how it's making their lives easier on a kind of like on that side too.
Yes, so I'll just share quickly because that is a great question that we get all the time. Just hang on 1 second while I there we go. Oh, sorry. Okay, so how you actually validate a market opportunity is define your customers. I know that's not an easy sentence, but who's going to buy it? Estimate the total number of customers. Engineers, this is a Fermi problem. So you're estimating, right? And usually this is reasonably easy to find close. Estimate the number of customers that assume you'll be wildly successful. You got to pick a revenue model. This is all just guessing. We on venture side know that, but estimate pricing and then bring it all together. I'll send this deck around, but we literally go through step by step how to do all of these things because it's not easy. It's not intuitive. And if you've never done it before, there is literally no way you would know. Because the first time I ran a company that raised like a whole bunch of venture capital, I still didn't know how to do that. So I will send around that deck and you guys can make use of that. It's hard.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, here, let me get back to any other questions while I'm getting back to my.
I have a quick question, but I came in a bit late, so I don't know if you might have already addressed it, but what if you're working on something? I know like a lot of companies like Duolingo and some of these other software companies, they didn't focus on monetization too much at the start because they were just focused on getting a customer base, right? So how do you approach that in the pitch? What if there's like initially you're just focused on growth, you're not worried too much about monetization. You know that there's a lot of avenues available for that, but you don't really know which one's the best for you at the moment. How do you like approach that?
I take it you're like angel pre-seed or seed stage.
No, we're much earlier than that. This is like we're prototyping at this point.
Yeah, so I mean, you just need to present a plan, right? There's lots of great businesses like Duolingo, Webflow is another one. I mean, there's a ton of businesses on B2C or B2B that have done this. That's totally fine. You just need to be clear on this is the plan.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, like software investors are very used to that. What we're going to want to see is that you've got usage, right? Because usage drives revenue. And you
Yeah.
could monetize attention like Facebook does. You can monetize engagement like, sorry, you can monetize engagement. You can monetize, there's the Fortnite model. There's a million model. There's the UCG model like Roblox. There's a million models here.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't, guys, the other thing is you don't need to have all the answers. You need to know where you're going. You need to be educated on the options. But I personally think like, so I invest a lot at your stage. How like the earliest possible stage, like we'll invest pre-product or like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't bother asking a ton of questions. I just want to see if you're strong as a founder, which means that you've
Mm-hmm.
done your research. But the honest answer is you don't know how you're going to monetize yet.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can say is like, well, applications like ours have monetized using these ways. Given what we're thinking this is likely like the right path, but by then we'll have this data, which will allow us to make this choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's a completely reasonable answer.
Okay, gotcha. Because our specific idea is B2B to C. And so, but the businesses we're trying to market to are not as willing at the start to try out something new. And so we're like, trying to start off with something that's very easy to use for them and doesn't cost them a lot. And then it kind of scales as they use the application more. So our initial idea is just to make it as cheap as possible for them so that they get used to it and they find value from it and then go from there as we slowly add more and more services.
I think that makes sense. So the other thing everyone should hear is your early stage product is always going to be wildly underpriced.
Mhm.
And it's going to be wildly underpriced because you're asking people to do something new with a product that's not mature yet. We all understand that. So
Okay.
like, even if you're charging like $100 a month now, and you're doing market size as an example, you could be like, look, at maturity, this thing's going to be worth $1,000. Like think about what's one that everyone
Hmm.
knows, HubSpot. When HubSpot, does everyone know HubSpot? Yeah, like
Hmm.
when HubSpot started, it was like this little weird inbound marketing thing that was like $19. And now HubSpot is a very gracious partner of ours, and their software is great and you should use it. But if we did pay a bill, it would be like 39 grand or something. So like we understand that applications mature. I would just make sure you're educated on what value you're creating for customers and what
Hmm.
because that's what you're really going to monetize on, right? Is the value
Hmm.
you create. I'm much more interested at early stage in the value you create than how you're monetizing.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure. Other questions? And actually, if you notice here on the kind of check the boxes piece, none of it is around go to market yet for your pitch deck.
Hey, it's Menachem here. Just quick question on the founder fit. So if you are not directly involved in the problem you're solving, would an advisor help, or would you need another founder who is directly involved in order for you to get funding?
It depends. I'm not going to make any blanket statements, but what's your right to win? Is it, and it might not look, if it's a problem that you are adjacent to, is it that you've executed this sales motion before? Is it that you've shipped a similar product before? Is it that like, what is your right to win? And so you don't have to, like, I wouldn't fund someone who's like, I'm building a bank who'd never worked in banking because that wouldn't work as an example. But there's lots of problems that you don't need to have worked in to
Right,
solve.
right. Okay,
Sometimes it
yeah,
takes an outsider to truly, do you know what I mean? Sometimes it takes an outsider
yeah,
to look at things that an industry or group of people are doing and being like, hey, maybe do that differently. Like sometimes it
right.
takes a fresh perspective. So that's fair. But the way you guys have to think about it is what is your right to win here? Why
Got
you?
it, got
What
it.
is your right to win? So I run our studio. We launch 8 companies a year. So I guess I still launch 8 companies a year. And one of our check boxes is why would we be allowed? Like, what's our right to win here?
Right. Thank you. Just one question. I don't know if this is the right spot for this. Is
Yep, go
if
ahead.
you have a massive vision, you want to solve a huge problem, but you want to also, VCs like to have, okay, what's your beachhead market, or how are you going to start creating revenue in the beginning? How
Yes.
important is that if you have this big vision, you want to work on the vision itself or build out this huge solution, this $100 million problem, or start tackling that. How small do you have to go? How much do you have to scale back in order to show that, okay, you can start building this? Let's say, nuclear fusion or something like that. Like how do you break that down and say, like, okay, we need to raise this small amount of money to sort of break in and start somewhere?
So the answer is there's signposts on every project. You guys are engineers. You all know the old engineering joke. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So there are, in any even complex engineering, I mean, nuclear fusion is one I obviously don't know a great deal about. Um, but there has to be signposts that your approach is succeeding, right? Now, whether that signposts are, obviously achieving sustainable net positive nuclear fusion is the end goal in your example. But what are the signposts before that? In a software business, it's like just building something a company will pay for. And then it's like getting one company to refer another company. In consumer, it's like getting a bunch of usage. And then we measure like weekly users or daily users, depending on the application set, right? And if we see that like 100 people are using this every week, like, whoa, okay, we've got something here. Now we can start thinking about monetize it, whatever. There has to be signposts, no matter how big your vision is. Like Rome wasn't built in a day. There are zero engineering projects in history that don't have checkpoints.
Right.
And to demonstrate that you're the right founder and that you are fundable, you're going to need to say, I am raising, because you can't go like, give me, I mean, unless you happen to be like boys with Bill Gates, you can't go to someone and be like, or actually, I should probably use Mackenzie Scott, since frankly, she's been doing more in the world. So unless you're friends with Mackenzie Scott, you can't just walk up to her and be like, hey, can I get $1 billion for fusion? Like, this is not, instead, it's like, hey, I've got this vision. We have this unique insight. I have a great team. These people would come on full time if I had money. And with that money, we're going to, improve the magnets that do this, because that will then blah, 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 blah. Again, I know nothing about nuclear fusion. So
Right. Yeah, it's just an
I think
example. It's not
magnets
what
are
we're doing.
involved. But
It's not what we're doing. It's just an example. All right, thank
yeah.
you for that.
So signposts, right?
Yeah. Milestones, small
Yep.
milestones.
Yep.
We have a hand raised. Sharon,
Yes.
go for it.
Hi, I had a question that how important is it to have a MVP? Like we have a prototype, but not an MVP.
So it depends. I would say in today's market, for most of your funds, unless you are building deeper technology, and I'll define deeper technology as like core models or, deeper technology, an innovative technical solution. If you've got something that's not that, there's two answers. One answer is, if you've proven you can sell people on the prototype ahead of time and they're willing to sign stuff or potentially pay you just to have this exist, then you can probably raising capital is never a sure thing. Then you have a chance to raise capital if you have a path to building that MVP. If you have no MVP and no traction or no market demand, it is, in this market, incredibly difficult, with the exception of some accelerators. And the only kind of accelerators worth considering are two types: the one you are currently in, where they're giving you massive value in return for no equity, and the second is mine, where I give you money on the first day. Every other type of accelerator is like kind of not, in my view, all that useful. So, you know, if like YC or Forum or Techstars or Alchemist or whatever, those are your best bets at that stage, unless you can show real market demand.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And then in a Forum or a YC, your job is to build the MVP and get to traction and then go out and raise money.
And does YC take people without an MVP, or they're more focused on the ideas?
Most major, I'm obviously not going to speak to YC, but sorry, YC definitely takes things before MVP. Most of us, and I put, like I said, there's probably 5 or 6 major accelerators at that stage, will take pre-MVP stuff. But that's usually the funding bucket for where you're at. Most pre-seed funds typically will wait to see that you've got a product and some usage.
Got it.
Unless like you sold your last, there's exceptions to the rule. You sold your last company, you've got a patent, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, thanks.
Other questions?
There was one like logistical question about how you'll share that the market determining market deck through email or whatever. You'll send it to me, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I can send it to you. Yeah.
Okay. And then there was a question and people started to kind of answer it about investors and their perception of international founders and whether or not there's a problem there at all from your experience.
Well, so the data says that VC is wildly biased and some other terms I could use, but I'm not going to.
Sure.
It depends on the VC. There are tons of world-changing companies started by internationals. The smart VCs don't care.
That's very fair.
Sometimes people's bias kicks into play, but like if you actually look, a pretty significant percentage of the unicorns ever started have actually been started by international or immigrant founders.
Yeah. And then, before, I don't think there are any more questions, but before we move on, I wanted to just double back to Menachem's question about founders and being the founder market fit. So because, for instance, the garage, and I'm sure in a lot of cases with other accelerators or just early stage startups, these are students or people who have no life experience yet. Their experience has been in research labs and developing ideas. And so at least from the garage's perspective, and maybe you can talk about it, Jonah, from the perspective of investors, I always say, like, who are the adults in the room, right? And that could be people that are your advisors, or maybe you're building out a board. Because when we're evaluating you guys as the right people, we want to know that you're not dependent on, for instance, the garage's resources or any outside things that you don't have yet to kind of amass yourself to answer questions and to have that kind of those doors that somebody's opening because maybe they are working in the exact industry that you're trying to break into. So I do think that there's room for like leaning in that area for this founder market fit, at least when you're applying to programs. I don't know if it's the same for VCs, whether or not it just seems like you're just saying names, like you're name dropping.
Yeah, no, so sometimes your right to win can just be your unique insight and the fact that you're younger and aren't attached to the old wrong way of doing things. And you're like, why don't we do it this way? That's a right to win. Sometimes it takes an outsider to do that. If you look at, some like really famous student-backed founded businesses, I guess Facebook is probably the most famous example, but it was going to take a young person who was digitally native to understand that there's going to be a new paradigm for how we communicate in a way that someone my age never could. Also, never ever underestimate your curiosity and bandwidth for learning and working at this age as a massive competitive advantage. Because you're not as, you know, like it just not as attached to stuff. Like right to win doesn't mean like, again, I wouldn't fund a student to open a bank without someone who'd done that. But there's 1,000,001 companies that we can and do all the time. I mean, I had a call today with 4 people who had graduated, you know, 3 months ago and who've never had a job. And I'm literally walking them through how they do customer discovery calls because they've never done it, because they're 4 engineers from the university where I live. So venture-backed businesses coming out of top-tier engineering schools is like a wildly successful category for us. Your right to win is also just respectfully and say it gently, I'm a fucking great engineer. That's a pretty good right to win in a lot of categories. So don't think it. Whereas someone, you know, someone will have experience in networking, you might not have those things. You've got drive and you've got a fresh perspective and you've got the ability to put it all on the line and risk more. And those all matter. So like you need to find your authentic right to win. And all of these things are strengths and embrace them.
Great. I think you can continue. I'm not sure how much for the record, we are at time and I don't want to, you know, push you further than you're capable of going, but
I'm going to finish this.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to check the boxes. So again, market, team, founder, market fit, and thesis. Okay. Now a few maybe don'ts. You probably know these already because these are like usual, but if you don't, here are some common mistakes to avoid. Your first deck should not be more than 10 pages because you're just telling a story. We want to tell people everything. The analog is to any long-term relationship. You don't start off a long-term relationship the first time meeting being like, hey, do you want to move in together? That would be strange. And you also don't start off by telling them everything about you because that would be strange. You typically start off by trying to find shared interests, in this case, building a huge company and telling the things that are good about yourself. That's what we do, right? So the same is here. I don't need 2 pages on the competitive landscape because until I believe that in you and the founder and the thesis, I don't really care. That'll all come out in subsequent calls. I don't need 4 pages on your product. Not in the beginning. I'm going to ask you to demo it at some point, but right now I don't need it. So 10 pages. If it's more than that, you're probably over explaining something. Don't speak negatively. This is true for a job interview. This is true for when you're raising capital. Sometimes I'll have people be like, Salesforce sucks. And like, I too do not enjoy using Salesforce. Salesforce is the most successful SaaS company of all time. So, you know, like the founder literally like went out of his way to be like, I built the tallest tower in San Francisco. So like, it doesn't suck. Like objectively, it's objectively the most successful one ever. So when you say that you're taking on a legacy because it's dumb or outdated or outmoded or manual, like there's usually reasons behind all this stuff. And so instead, it's just we've got a better way. Like, don't speak negatively about competitors. Their team is bad. Their product is bad. That's not. Speak positively about yourself. It's also just a more positive energy to go through life with, but like it will dock you because there's usually some backstory you don't know when you're speaking negatively. Do not leave your vision unclear. If you can't explain it in 2 or 3 sentences how the world's going to be different, that is what you need to work on. It is really hard. But fundraising is hard. There's almost no point in going out until you're clear on that. Poor design. Especially you guys, your students, you're surrounded by people who can do this. You know, trade with someone. It takes an hour to brush up your deck. Don't leave any points unproven. If you're like, this is the biggest market ever, like just don't prove it. I shouldn't need to say typos and whatnot, but like the problem is you guys have been staring at this thing forever, and so you make one change and you don't even read it anymore because you like can't see it. So your last edit should go to like your sister who's an English teacher or something, who doesn't know anything about tech. And is just reading it for English and being like, this makes no sense, because that happens to me a lot. Or you're like an acronym city or, whatever. Don't have lots of product in your pitch deck. Your product is a how. You can share a little bit about your solution. And I know as engineers, this is very hard for us to not do this. You will inevitably over-index on product. Try not to. When you're pitching for the first time, don't go over 15 minutes. Means you're sharing too much, because again, the only thing we're trying to do is prove this. They'll ask questions. They're smart people. And don't assume knowledge of the person on the other side. I get this a lot. People are like, oh, he's a VC. He must know about how I use Docker to blah, blah. I don't. I really don't. AWS's console has this huge problem. I haven't logged into an AWS console in like 5 years. I have no idea. So just don't assume knowledge. And that's it. So in summary, we're going to build a story to build heat in our business about how we're the right people to build a $100 million revenue business. And then we're going to fill in everything around that story. I do have another 7 minutes for questions about literally anything, so happy to answer them.
Kathleen has a question. I don't know if she's available to ask it. Kat, are you there to ask?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Hi, I'm Kat, founder of C0. We're building the co-pilot of logistics for businesses. So my question is, we've been in business for a year and learned a new insight along the way. How should that be part of the narrative? If so, how to effectively set that up?
Yeah, definitely. A year isn't such a long time. So yeah, I don't think that time frame needs positioning, or you're right in the sweet spot where we'd expect, like, you're good. No explanation required, really. No, you can share the progress, but yeah, no, there's no, that is what I would say at the stage that we see you are sitting right in and around typical.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, totally normal.
A question about how to contact you in the future. Are you an email guy, or are you a LinkedIn connect?
You can LinkedIn connect with me, but here is my email. And you can email.
Any other questions from the group before we just praise Jonah for being with us again and again, and really just being such a huge resource to the garage? And I mean that, initially I was talking about how he spends his time with us, the time he gives us, but outside of these programs that he participates in, he has had really great advice and has provided office hours for the teams at the garage. Obviously, there are teams that he's thinking about for Forum, and there are teams that he believes in. It's not just like an endless supply of Jonah support, but at the end of the day, like, no, every team that's ever interacted with you, Jonah, has had nothing but like positive experiences and feel very genuinely supported. So I hope you guys all felt that for this past hour. And if you are interested in connecting with Jonah, obviously his email's there. You guys will also get the recording. Next week, we have an info session for our space cohort. Please join if there are space applications to your technology. You might be building something, some like heat technology for clothing. And it's a technical solution, and you're thinking about it in terms of using it here on Earth, but perhaps it could also be used in space. So don't be afraid to apply for the space cohort if you think your technology has space applications. And we also have some really great speakers coming on down the line, and hopefully I'll be able to nab Jonah for the next VC Angel office hours.
Yep.
Yeah. And hopefully for even more Oceanside chats as we kind of continue this path of learning.
I am always happy to help, and everyone, I did start my first business out of engineering school, so I know how hard it is. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks again, Jonah.
Thanks.
Thank
guys.
you, Jonah.
Appreciate your time. Take care.
Bye-bye.